Hi everyone, I wanted to start the course with some very basic definitions. Just a brief introduction to defining or exploring human experience through the use of phenomenology. So we'll begin by asking, what is phenomenology? We'll also look very briefly at the meaning of phenomenon in phenomenology. So we'll take about 8 slides, 15 to 20 minutes. We'll take a quick look at the origins of phenomenology, where it came from and why. And we'll also explore the term that is often paired with phenomenology, and that's hermeneutics. What is that? Then we touch on hermeneutic phenomenology and how it can be applied to professional practice, and what Max van Manen calls a phenomenology of practice. So our goal here is to help set up your reading in the first part of the course. And we may all be coming to the course with different levels of understanding. Maybe it's a first time you've really explored phenomenology. Maybe you have some background previously. But it can be somewhat of an intimidating topic, but it will come through time, through reading and immersing yourself in the literature. Phenomenology has its roots in philosophy, and often it's the philosophical reading that people find a little more challenging. That being said, you do not have to be a philosopher to take up phenomenological research, but it is helpful to be familiar with the work of those that have provided the foundation for phenomenological thinking. So our goal is to provide some of the basics, to give you a foothold to support your own reading and your own writing and your journey into phenomenological research. So let's go. So phenomenology, in its essence, is the study of human experience as it is lived. Experience is not the accumulation of events, knowledge, thinking back, a narrative, but something that happens to us, something we undergo. The phenomenon in phenomenology are the ways we find ourselves being in relation to the world through our everyday living. The phenomenologist Mark Weigel puts it really nicely. He says that the primary purpose of phenomenology as a research methodology, stemming from its philosophical roots, is to study what it is like to find ourselves being in relation with others. A teacher with a student, nurse with a patient, therapist with a client, a mother and a child, and in relation with other things. Be a good book, some bad news, our favorite activity, a particular anxiety, a fair, an exercise routine. The list is endless. So in phenomenology, the phenomenon refers to the objects or events as they appear in conscious experience. Phenomenology is a philosophical approach and research method that focuses on understanding and describing the structures of conscious experience as they are perceived by individuals. It emphasizes the subjective nature of human experience and aims to uncover the essential features or meanings underlining the phenomenon, underlining the experience. So when conducting research using phenomenology as an approach in what we call the human sciences, researchers are looking to understand the essence of lived experiences as they are directly perceived by individuals. Now this involves setting aside, or what we call bracketing, any preconceived assumptions or interpretation, points of view, and we need to focus on the raw data, if you will, the subjective experience. By analyzing the phenomena themselves, researchers look to uncover the underlying meanings, the patterns, the structures that shape human consciousness and behavior. Phenomenological research often involves asking open-ended questions that encourage people to reflect on their subjective experiences. For example, I could ask, can you describe a recent experience that you felt completely absorbed in? an activity in which you are completely taken over by? How do you experience the feeling of anxiety in your daily life? What is it like to experience a moment of profound awe or wonder? These are all possible phenomena. So the origins. Phenomenology is a philosophical movement and was initiated by Edmund Husserl in the early 20th century and later by Martin Heidegger. It was a response to the mind-body or mind-world split, a dualism that dominated Western thinking for hundreds of years. It was Descartes, who was living in the 1600s. He famously said, "I think, therefore I am," and this signaled that meaning was created in the mind, separate from the social world, the natural world, even the human body. Motions, thoughts, feelings, experience were mere illusions. And for a long time, the preferred method to understand the world, and some would say still is, was through detached observation, controlled experiment, mathematical and quantitative measurement. This was also the case when the subjects under the study were people. It was the case when the subject was human culture, society, social structures, human behavior, psychology, children, patients, young people, the mentally ill. The preferred approach was scientific, empirical, quantitative. Now, the scientific method works very well for certain subjects. It's excellent for the natural sciences and engineering, and has resulted in amazing new knowledge that has reshaped human life in unimaginable ways. However, the positivistic experimental approach is not well suited to understanding human beings and how humans experience the world. Phenomenology is a human science presented an alternative way to understand human experience as it is lived. It was Husserl that recognized this crisis, he called it, and to do this, an alternative set of methodological tools were required, very different from the natural sciences. This was the project of the early phenomenologists like Husserl and Heidegger. So what is this hermeneutics? Hermeneutics is really the art and science of interpretation. It is the interpretation of the description of experience revealed by phenomenology. It is the study of experience together with its meanings. Martin Heidegger has been credited with bringing hermeneutics together with phenomenology. He built on the work of his teacher, Edmund Husserl, and then surpassed him, many would argue. Heidegger focused the emphasis of phenomenology on being. The phenomenon or human experiences are thought of how we find ourselves in the world. Heidegger's hermeneutical approach puts the focus on the preposition in, as in how experience comes into being, as humans relate with things and one another in the world. By placing in front of the phenomenon, it helps to orient us to being and how we find ourselves in the world. This is the ontological project of hermeneutic phenomenology. Now, ontology and ontological are fancy words that mean understanding how we are in the world, in our experience of, for example, in caring for another, how we are in pain, how we are in communication, in friendship, in trouble, in a classroom, in a hospital bed, in walking outdoors, in playing, in swimming, in recording online videos. The list is endless. Phenomenology provides the foundation for understanding human experience directly, while hermeneutics offers methods for interpreting and making sense of these experiences as they are expressed through texts, symbols, art, cultural artifacts. Hermeneutics helps to uncover the deeper significance and implications of these experiences. Phenomenology, in turn, provides the raw material, the descriptions of lived experiences that hermeneutics can analyze and interpret. So hermeneutics and phenomenology can be seen as complementary approaches that together provide a framework for understanding and interpreting human experience in all its richness and complexity. Phenomenology of practice is Max van Manen's. You will be meeting and learning more about him. It's his approach to applying phenomenological methods and a phenomenological way of being to professional practice. For Van Manen, phenomenology is not simply another research method among others that you can choose. Phenomenology calls for a sensitivity and openness, empathy, or a pathic orientation to the way we experience others. It's the way we know the world and the way we live. Van Manen says it is in this way that research is a caring act. To thoughtfully, tactfully inquire into human experience is to come to know it more deeply. It's in this way that phenomenology potentially increases our insight and understanding of ourselves and others in our personal and professional lives, whether that be in teaching, nursing, counseling, medicine, psychology, social work, among other fields. So almost there, phenomenology has certain key elements on which the researcher must pay close attention. First, it's focused on human experience. It's important to understand that any experience is a potential subject for phenomenological inquiry, but it's lived experience as it is lived. That's the subject. It is also a search for essences. Phenomenology is about the unique, the experience of a person, but it seeks to connect with the universal and the shared. By looking at the unique, the specific, the particular, this opens up the significance of the experience in its shared or universal quality. Thirdly, it describes experiential meaning as it's lived through. Phenomenology attempts to describe and assign meaning to lived experiences. It does not explain through analysis of theories or situate meaning historically, critically, politically. The meaning comes through description and interpretation that is as rich and detailed as everyday experiences as they are lived. It also employs human science methods. We'll be learning more about these. Science in the human sciences comes from the Latin scientia, to know. It's not reflective of the experimental positivistic approaches we talked about earlier that are associated with the natural sciences. It draws on identifiable practice to make known the meaning of human experience. It is a human science in that it seeks to understand, to know the meaning of human experiences as its focus of study. It is also the practice of thoughtful attunement. Phenomenological research is characterized by a sensitive inquiry into the human condition. The everyday practical concerns of people who ask, what is it like to fill in the blank? What is it like to, you can fill in that blank with any human experience. This requires the taking up of a thoughtful stance in relation to who and what we are studying. In doing so, we, the researcher, becomes more fully human as we inquire into the nuances and many ways of being in this world. And finally, phenomenology relies on a special relationship with language as our defining ability as humans. Van Manen calls this focus on language in phenomenological research a poetizing activity, from poetry. In saying this, he seeks to capture the use of language to describe human experience in a way that evokes and stirs and resonates the particularities of human experience, so the reader will come to recognize the essences and the universal and make them say, yes, that's what it's like, or that's how it is, or I recognize that, I understand that that's what it must be like. And finally, in conclusion to our very brief introduction, phenomenology is unlike any other research approach, unlike other research methods. It defies the language of technique or the strategies or the steps to be followed. Some people find this frustrating, others find it liberating. With that being said, phenomenological research employs certain guidelines and procedures and approaches. It has features that offer practical guidance for doing research. Each of these have specific activities that we'll be learning more about in this course. According to Van Manen, these research activities, when taken together, describe the method of phenomenological research. The first, he says, and perhaps one of the most important, is orienting to lived experience. This has come up a couple of times. You understand your focus is a lived experience, a deep inquiry into some human experience that you are moved by, you're committed to, you're invested in understanding in a new, rich, and original way. Your inquiry will be one description of an experience, but maybe one among others that may be different or may go in a different direction. It all begins with arriving at an appropriate phenomenological question oriented to a suitable lived experience. Second, inquiring into experience as it is lived is also important. Phenomenological research seeks to come into closer contact with human experience, to look at it closely and explore it in new ways, coming from different perspectives. This is what is understood in Husserl's famous line, "to the things themselves." Thirdly, we consistently focus on the experience. Staying oriented to the experience can be challenging. It can be tempted to get sidetracked. It can be tempting to fall into commentary or telling personal narratives, to resort to theories and abstractions or personal reflections and points of view. Staying oriented to the experience is absolutely crucial. And then out of that comes the reflection, the interpretation, the emergence of themes. Reflecting on an experience is to be in pursuit of what gives that experience its special significance. What is lived through most often escapes our significance in its everydayness. This is called our natural attitude. Reflection draws out the essential significance of that which otherwise escapes our awareness. And finally, and very importantly, research is writing and rewriting. Phenomenological research is writing and rewriting. It is in its essence about bringing language, that which is often unintelligible to us. Thinking through with language in the form of writing is the first order of business for the phenomenological research, balancing parts and the whole. So that sums up a quick overview, just to give you some sense of some of the terminology, some of the language. We'll be going much more in depth and describing and experiencing, discussing and reading and sharing throughout the course. Really looking forward to it. I hope you found this helpful and informative.